The RFP has become a four-letter word. The sourcing hero can help facilitate this process.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast. I'm Catherine, your host, and today I have a very special guest on, Dave Hulsen, the COO of RFP 360, and that's an RFP software. Dave, welcome to the show.
Well, hi, Catherine. Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you, and I'm so excited to have another Kansas City company on the show. We have yet to have a local guest on, and when we first reached out last fall to start working together, I was so excited that there was somebody else in procurement that I could just hop in the car, drive down the road, literally 5 minutes away. So I appreciate you guys with your partnership and absolutely sharing your insight today on the show.
Great. Well, again, thanks for having us.
So Dave, we were just chatting a few moments ago, and your background is very interesting. And I think that coming from 20 years of tech and consulting and being in the practice of creating RFPs, sending out RFPs, has born the idea of RFP 360. And so your insight today is going to be very unique. We have not yet had anybody on the show with this perspective. And so I am very curious to know, in your opinion, what a sourcing hero means to you.
I would be glad to define that. I will step back real fast and say that when Stuart, my co-founder, and I started the business, I had come from the buyer side. He had come from the respondent side, the seller side. And we had long talked that there was a huge disconnect. And sending documents through email, while that was considered RFPs at the time, was far from the maturity that the internet was allowing us at the time. I think that a sourcing hero is someone who can help facilitate this process. I mean, there are best practices throughout. There's a lot of facilitation, negotiation that goes on. And my experience, having been that sourcing person, I was not a sourcing hero. And I feel bad about that. There were some walls that we put up to protect ourselves, to protect our stakeholders. And those aren't super beneficial to the process. In fact, they're detrimental to the process. And as I like to joke, the RFP has become a four-letter word over I don't know how many years, but rarely do we talk about RFPs without a very emotional response, no matter who it's coming from, the buyer or the seller. And that is something that we need to tamp down so that the RFP is a vehicle, RFP, RFI, DDQ, whatever it is, an exchange of information in a controlled manner that does not overburden one side or the other, but allows an organization to make a strategic decision based on the right factors and, again, does not overburden the responding organization. Transparency, fairness, those are all things we have to balance.
I think it's really cool that you, as someone from the buyer side, and your co-founder as someone on the seller side, you were able to come together and realize that there needs to be some balance, and you were able to create an actual product, a piece of software that does that. That's so cool.
Everybody has their horror stories. And even a federal buyer was telling me in the defense contracting business how back in the day of paper proposals, they would request these proposals and they already kind of knew who they wanted to win. We all knew this kind of stuff goes on. It still does. And it's horrible. But when the delivery trucks would come in with the boxes of proposals, they would route the winners to one room and the losers to others, which meant that there were thousands of pages of documentation that a contractor may have put together that never saw the light of day. And obviously, if those vendors knew that was the case, they would never bid on this work because they spent tens of millions of dollars potentially preparing answers over the course of a year or more. And how horrible is that? And so we've taken the paper out in many cases and made these portals where we're passing documentation, but the preparation work is still there, no matter how it's delivered. And so anytime that we can bring some level of transparency, fact-based decision, anything like that, we start to bring down these walls. And the internet has allowed this exchange of information in near real time that can really help people truly partner together. People don't use our system to buy coal. Cost is not the most important thing in the projects that go through our platform. Complexity of RFP is we see all these qualitative questions. How do you do this? What's your approach to that? And making sure that we allow people, graders, reviewers, to evaluate responses and create something quantifiable about that so you can really compare apples to apples and make a decision. That's what the RFP process is for. Software helps that, but people have to be open to that. They have to have a process that values that. I got way off topic on that. So
No, it's absolutely on topic, because what you've essentially said is that the sourcing hero has to be the one to break down the walls, and the software that you guys have created helps facilitate that. It's another tool to achieve that.
yeah,
I mean, we can say, all right, your definition of a sourcing hero is, but I mean, you've lived it by action.
I hope I didn't do this as bluntly as an RFP we were working on recently. We were responding to an RFP, and this big Fortune 500 company procurement person, no matter what question we came back with, it was just answer the question. And we needed more information to really come up with the right approach. Obviously, we wanted 10 minutes with the stakeholder just to ask these questions. And I get it, in a big bureaucracy, you don't necessarily want to open that gate. But to be the filter or the conduit, the value added conduit, that procurement person should have gone back to the stakeholder and gathered the information. I think that shows a lack of caring in a procurement person. There was a governmental RFP where we were asked to respond to from an agency in California, and they had all these requirements, some of which included, like, what are your fax capabilities and things. And I pushed back and said, well, I need to know the priorities of these things, because I feel like you took this off the shelf from 10, 15 years ago, because I'm not sure that faxing is something that we need to be concerned about right now. And they had no response to this. So we didn't bid on it. And the boss's boss called me afterwards and said, we really wanted you guys to bid on this. We really like your solution. We thought it would be a great fit, and you probably would have won. And that would have been transformative to our company. But for an organization to not even write a well thought out RFP, pulling stuff off the shelf, not questioning requirements, you're going to get bad results with that. Or, like in our case, I'm biased, the best solution didn't even want to answer it because it didn't make sense and it was too much work.
Well, and your values weren't aligned, right? Because what they value is not the same as what RFP 360 values. And even if you had worked with them and had bid and had won that business, how many other issues were you going to run into on down the line?
That's a great point. We had a presentation with one of the ISM groups a couple of weeks ago. They talked about adding questions and weighting sections that have value alignment strategies there. So, for example, let's say you're buying some software. Okay, well, obviously you have to ask all about functionality and price and things like that, security. But then getting into, if you want to show a value alignment, start asking about sustainability initiatives, diversity initiatives, all these things that, if they're important to you as an organization, ask about those things. Some of your bidders will be ecstatic to talk about what they've been doing. And if you've got an apples to apples comparison and you've got one vendor that stands out because of their alignment of values, everybody can feel good about that. It's got to be the right purchase, the right solution at the right price for all those reasons. But for values to align, that is even better. Because we get these questionnaires after the fact. A lot of times we'll ink a deal and I get a survey I have to fill out or a policy I need to sign off on that we don't traffic humans and things like that. And obviously they're easy to sign off on. But putting those up front, I think would be even better, because it gives me, as a bidder, an idea of what's important to them. And I don't know. I mean, I think that a lot of people are still asking the same questions. And if any of you have seen a municipal or federal or state agency RFP, the template has not changed in so long. And the lack of innovation there is really, some organizations like that are not known for their technical innovation. They're not known for process innovation. And you can see it in the RFPs that they write. Whereas private companies, we see RFPs that don't look like they used to look. And
Yeah.
that's exciting. Requesting videos and things, because you can embed that in the internet. So this is the internet age.
Oh,
So
wow. Videos
I mean,
now.
why would you not, if you're using an internet platform to do your RFP and let's say you require a cover letter from the CEO of the bidding organization, why would you want a stock cover letter that the CEO probably didn't even read and just used the marketing team just put their signature on versus a video of why we're a great fit? I mean, you can personalize things now. People can make a video. Obviously, we all have cameras on our computers now. I have seen RFPs still with 1,000 questions that cover all these different functionality things. How does a user log in and do this? Does a password have to be 18 characters? The really smart buyers that we see in our platform throw out those 1,000 questions and they get it down to like, show us how a user logs in, show us how they do this or that. Because guess what? The marketing team's already produced these videos to sell the software. But even by demonstrating this stuff in a one-off demo, the evaluators don't have to read through all these questions. They can watch a 5-minute video and they can say, oh, this is an amazing solution, or it's a little clunky. I would rather spend 5 minutes across 3 different vendors, maybe 15 minutes total watching videos, than read 1,000 times 3 responses and try to grade those. What happened in the past is people didn't grade those. So if you're a buyer and you ask 1,000 questions and you're not prepared to evaluate 1,000 times however many vendors responded responses, you are doing a disservice to those vendors.
It's a broken system.
Yeah.
To start with. So one of our previous guests on the show, his name's Frank Corris. He was a former CPO, very familiar with the RFP process.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his stories was an epiphany about RFPs and how basically the same issue, all of these pointless questions. Why is he having to go through all of that? And he had this moment where he's like, I'm going to do a rubric instead. This is what's important to our business. This is what's important to the stakeholders. And that's how I'm grading everything. And he's like, I'm not asking about their internet service. I'm not asking about how many employees they have in every single location globally. He decided he was making short and sweet rubrics based on what actually the information they actually needed. And so he shares the same frustrations.
I don't know if this is a stated best practice. There's I forget the guy's name that wrote the book on RFPs, Bud, somebody. I lost the book, so I have it in my Amazon cart to buy again. But part of me doesn't want to reference an older text because times have changed. So for example, if you have 6 make or break questions about a potential solution, maybe it's security or adherence to policies or where's your data stored or whatever, don't put those in the RFP. Ask those questions up front in the first gate. We see people successfully doing this. There are 20 potential vendors. I'm going to send 6 questions out to these folks. I'm going to narrow it down to 3.
There you go.
Who doesn't want that? For example, when somebody comes to us and they say, we need software that sits on our premises, we can say, not us. Keep on walking down the street, find the next person, because we can't do it. So if you publish an RFP and we start reading this stuff, or we start answering it, I mean, what if it's buried somewhere in there? A buyer knows what the make or break decisions are, decision points, and everything else is a shade of gray. Knock those out up front.
Yeah.
I don't know. We've seen customers really use the system the right way. We've also, sadly, had to allow certain features to be turned off. For example, I believe to my core that you should publish the weighted scoring so that every section has a weight, could be 0, could be 100 points, whatever, and every question therein has a relative weight. I, as a respondent, should be able to see that because I'm going to spend my time. We do this as students. We should do this as workers. This is a really impactful section. My approach statement is really important. Well, I'm going to spend time on that. But if your faxing capabilities are not worth anything, then I'll spend less time talking about our faxing capabilities, or I'll feel confident that we don't have fax capabilities. So we had to allow organizations to be able to toggle that on or off because some of our customers said, oh, we would never show this. Well, we can't use your software if it's going to force these best practices. And so we thought, do we mandate best practices or do we find a way to encourage best practices and maybe change some behavior over time. And we decided that we would allow people to turn off certain best practices with the intent that we would try to educate them to start using them. And that was our way of saying, we don't want to enable some of these bad practices, but we definitely want people to start using the system, obviously for various selfish reasons, but then also we could educate and raise the bar over time.
I like that. In an industry where change tends to come slowly, especially in this arena with RFPs, that was probably the right call, because there are other areas of the software that are, in innovation, and that's enough in and of itself for change. But I do like the toggle idea, and maybe eventually it'll come to the point where nobody's even using the toggle and everybody has it on, and it'll just be
Yeah,
something that's implemented, right?
yeah, that's right. And I get this at home from, so my wife responds to RFPs as part of her job. And I still hear, even in this day and age, just so much frustration about the way an RFP was written, or even, I mean, there are still industries that are requiring people to have a courier drop off copies of proposals. And I'm going to call out the county of Jackson County, Missouri. I mean, they should be called out for this. They require that kind of stuff. They require in person bid meetings. So you might be the best solution and you're in Seattle and you're not willing to fly to Kansas City for the pre proposal bid conference. So you're excluded. And as a taxpayer, man, that makes me sad
Yeah.
because you're only getting solutions within a driving distance of our city.
Sounds archaic.
It does. Yeah.
So, what's your advice to up and coming procurement? After listening to this conversation, I think I know what it might be, but for our listeners, how would you encourage them to rise up, and empower them?
There are a lot of buyers, I'll call them buyers. In the personas, there are buyers that have tried to bring our solution into their company and they've been met with some resistance, for example, from maybe upper management who might think about things in a different way, maybe have some historical concerns with this or whatever. They're not thinking out of the box. I would say that you should challenge everything you're doing, and not in a bad way. I'm just saying, like, challenge the people, the process, and the technology. So the system, what we call the system of those three parts, challenge that all the time. We have a template we have to use. There's a reason for that. Why are we doing an RFP? Is this the right vehicle? We continue to challenge those things. And if you don't get a satisfactory response, then maybe there's a change that can happen. Fighting for tools and technology is tough against budgets, especially in the environment we're in right now. But if you can convince somebody that you'll get better competition, better results, a better solution at a better price, even if you don't have the hard data to back that up, I think it would be an organization that you might not want to work for if they were totally opposed to change.
Right. Who's going to say no to that in their right mind?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think with the pandemic, change and innovation within procurement has really come under the microscope. And luckily, there's a light that's shining on procurement and supply chain right now. And we have to be mobile. We have to be able to adapt to what's happening. And I think there's probably going to be a lot less of that resistance over the next couple of years, thankfully.
What was I reading? Oh, in the courts, for example, the court systems, some experts said we have made 10 years of technology progress in 10 weeks because we had to move away from in-person hearings and now we're online and things. There's a lot of change going on and the procurement process is not immune to those. So just putting together RFPs and gathering proposals and things, like, nobody should be pushing paper
Right.
through this time. But it goes beyond that. So I talked to the now retired procurement officer at a university, and I said, "Would you be interested in exploring what we might call an eRFP platform?" And he said, "Oh, we've already done that." And I said, "Well, I'm looking at one of the RFPs, and somebody wrote this in Word. I believe they printed it off and scanned it back in as a PDF and posted it to your website. So I have basically a 70-page picture that is completely unusable. I can't parse it into words. I just have to print it off and read it and circle things." And he said, "Yeah, well, that's an electronic RFP. Like, it's digital now." I said, "I don't think you're understanding what digital means. Componentized, modular. That's like in our platform, an RFP is a series of sections. In it, are different elements of data, read-only text, help text, all this stuff with questions that beg for answers. And all of that looks like a document, but it's actually little bits of data that you can push around, you can reassign, you can do all this stuff. And when it gets back to evaluating it, the best thing I always wanted was to have that apples to apples comparison. Instead of flipping through proposals and trying to compare one person's response here to one person's response here, because we have this componentized, I can have a grid of all the answers. Like here are the answers to the same question, and I can compare that. And it seems so simple, but that's what technology allows us to do. It looks and feels the same way, but it's consumed a completely different way. And it can lead to a totally different way, more efficient way of working, better results, people being able to question their own process or their evaluation means and things. So anyway, in this day and age, in this time period, this pandemic time period, we have fewer teams sitting around a table influencing one another in the procurement process, in the evaluation phase. That is very important. You need to have your evaluators reading independently and then coming together to share out their results. Because if you and I don't agree that so-and-so's capabilities are the strongest versus another one's, we have to talk about that. So having that clear data that shows outliers and where we agree, that's where we can spend our time. Oh, we agree that so-and-so is the top competitor. They have these strengths and weaknesses. That's fantastic. But if I'm dominating the conversation and you have something really important and maybe you're newer, younger, whatever at the company, not as boisterous, your voice will be silenced around those tables. And we used to hear that from our customers a lot. And I hope that this sort of work, independent work that is then brought together, will help us get more independence of evaluation.
Well, I was going to ask you to give me a quick summary of RFP 360 software, but I think that we just got that from you. But if there's anything else that you want to tell our audience about RFP 360 and the difference that you're making with the software, floor's all yours.
Transparency is critical, but also reducing that barrier. We talked a little bit about the barrier to responding to an RFP. We have competitors that help people issue RFPs. We have competitors that help people respond to RFPs. We chose this really difficult ridge to walk along where we're trying to balance the needs of both sides, but it is the only way to approach this because it's a two-party transaction. Multiple parties, obviously, multiple respondents, but a buyer and a seller in this transaction. And the solution requires us to address the needs of both sides. That has been very difficult to do because they have conflicting needs sometimes, so we have to find some middle ground there. It is by far more advanced than I ever thought it would be. People are finding more uses than I thought initially. The data that is available is more mind-blowing than I ever thought, and I think will have some great ramifications to understanding how people purchase things, how people respond, where a sales and marketing team can improve their individual responses. Not just, well, we lost this bid or we won this bid, but having actionable information about why you won or lost. And that can change a bidder's solution over time and the way they pitch themselves. And that has great impact. I mean, raising
so much value. Exactly.
And yeah, raise the waters for everybody. We're going to get better solutions, better prices, all this stuff. Competition I'm pro competition. We lose deals and I get sad about those, but we better be getting stronger every time we do it. So
I love that. If you're not in it to grow and get better, then you're just like the others that you're trying to beat, right?
Yeah.
If somebody is interested in looking into RFP 360, where can they find you guys?
We can be found on the internet at rfp360.com.
Perfect. Well, I'll be sure to include those links on this podcast page and the links to the product itself. So thank you so much, Dave. This has been a unique perspective that we haven't had yet on the show, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your version of the sourcing hero with us.
I really enjoyed it. I didn't realize how much pent-up emotion I had about RFPs recently. And this is a great forum because my mom always said, Dave, you've got a face for radio or podcasts.
Oh my goodness. I'm hoping that people take this and relate to it, share your frustrations, and maybe even take a look at RFP 360 and see what you guys are up to.
All right. Sounds wonderful. Thanks for the time today.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Till next time.
Have a good day.